Good evening. I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show, and Larry Kudlow is here of CNBC and Kudlow Radio on the weekend. We're eager to discuss the Republican candidates, the gathering of the clan in New Hampshire, the 2016 election underway, the surprising news that Larry Sabato, that well-known, even-handed tout in Washington, declared this Republican field okay. Nothing funny about this. Everybody's a professional, spoke well. In fact, enormous managerial skills breaking out in the Republican Party for these fledgling campaigns. Larry, a very good evening to you. The fact that none of the Republicans have been attacked by the major media, is that in itself an accomplishment after several days? Good evening to you, Larry.
Good evening, John. Actually, it's an interesting point. Most of the focus has been on Hillary's miscues. So, yeah, the media hadn't gotten... I mean, they went after Rand Paul a little bit, and they went after Ted Cruz on the evangelical supporters. But, you know, by and large, I agree, and that is interesting. But, you know, the managerial stuff, I know we're going to talk about this. You got to ask yourself, you got two models here. One is a managerial / governor model, and the other one is a managerial / first-term senator model.
Right.
And I think that distinction is going to become more and more important as time goes on.
Yeah, who talks the game, who's done the game. We welcome our colleague Steve Moore of the Heritage Foundation. Heritage is keen on measuring the economy at all moments. And I'm going to ask Steve's help with Larry, because they have meetings routinely to welcome the new Republican candidates, to assess the Republican candidates of last weekend in terms of their economic savvy and also this magical word growth. Good evening to you, Steve. The candidates last weekend, Mr. Walker, Mr. Rubio, Mr. Bush, all spoke very well. Did they speak well of growth in your measure? Good evening, Steve.
Yeah, they did. And look, I think this has become a growth party. I wrote a piece this week about how, Steve Forbes, when he ran for president 20 years ago against the Republican establishment with these kind of bold ideas like, the flat tax and Social Security reform and term limits and others, he really became I think he changed the party for the better. And so one of the points I made is that if you look at this field of candidates, Larry, I look at it, I see 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 of these candidates who will endorse some form of a low-rate flat tax, which is fantastic. We need it. Clear out all the rubbish in the tax system and get the rates down low. That's a Reagan-esque pro-growth idea. I think they're talking about some, sensible kind of entitlement reforms. I think that they want to get the EPA, off the back of businesses, and those are the kinds of things that will create growth. And that really is a sharp contrast, I think, from where Hillary Clinton is, where her whole rhetoric for the last 2 weeks has all been a Robin Hood. It's all been redistribute, take from the rich and give to the poor.
Well, yeah, but Steve, my brother, I didn't watch everybody, but I was watching C-SPAN, and I probably saw, 6 or 7 of these guys. And I agree with you subliminally. They want growth and flatter tax rates. But you know what? I didn't hear enough about growth from them in New Hampshire. And I want to warn that they are focusing an awful lot on Hillary Clinton, attacking Hillary, and some of it's very snarky, okay? I would let her hang herself, because it looks like she's doing a good enough job there. But I didn't really hear, I know Cruz is for a flat tax, Rand Paul is for a flat tax, I know that Perry's for a flat tax, but no one emphasized it. And Marco Rubio mentioned his tax reform plan. You and I like part of it, and we don't like other parts of it. So I was kind of underwhelmed about the growth message, and I felt they were taking too much time to trash Hillary, and they're not putting out yet a positive agenda.
Well, I think it's a fair point. And look, you and I have been working on this kind of growth project, and, you were showing me the numbers this week under Reagan, where we had, what was the average in his 7 years of growth? It was something like near 4.5%. And John Batchelor, if we could get the 4.5% growth, even for a few years, this would solve a whole range of problems. It would solve the problem of unemployment. It would solve the problem of stagnant wages.
And entitlements. It'd solve entitlements for a long time.
It would help bring the entitlement crisis under bay too. I mean, you're going to need some reforms in those programs, but the more you grow the economy, the more tax revenues you get in, the less people that go on welfare. It's the greatest way to balance the budget.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. See, to me, that's totally right. They ought to set targets. They ought to set targets for growth, like a 4% target. I think actually Jeb Bush has said that publicly. That'd be a real good thing. Which I didn't really, Steve Moore. I didn't really like Christie's Social Security plan. And here too, if he had greater emphasis on growth, he'd have much better numbers to work with. And secondly, I'm not in favor of cutting benefits. I mean, I'm in favor of expanding the retirement age. I think that's fine. But cutting benefits, for people up to, $80,000 a year, and then eliminating benefits for people making over $200,000
and means testing. He also talked about that, Larry.
I don't like any of that stuff. I'd rather see an option to have personal savings accounts.
Me too. And me too. And by the way, if the Democrats are talking about making, Social Security more generous, and Republicans are talking about cutting benefits, I don't like the side Republicans are on in that debate. And by the way, I mean, look, if you make over $100,000 a year and you've paid into that system for 40 years, and Republicans are saying, by the way, if you make over $200,000, you get no benefits at all. I mean, what kind of a deal is that? I mean, you paid in for 40 years and you get nothing out of it?
It's crazy. I mean, you probably pay whatever you pay, $1 million over the time. It's crazy. Yeah. If you invested that in a mix of stocks and bonds over 30, 40 years, you're going to get basically a 7% average return. That's the way even the last 20 years, even including the crash of 2008, you're still running 6-7%.
Larry, I just a touch on growth again. You mentioned, and Steve mentioned, flat tax. Is that well understood by the public? Has the Republican Party done a good job of presenting that story?
No, I mean, if everybody read Steve's stuff and Steve Forbes' stuff or Art Laffer's stuff or even my stuff, if they have a better sense of what a flat tax is. I don't think people know, and I think you got people in the Republican Party that say the numbers don't work and it's too pie in the sky. I don't want to mention any names, but they diss it whatever they can. So take a Ted Cruz who has come out for it, or Rand Paul. Fill in the blanks. Explain to people what the hell this thing is, because people be surprised, I think, how workable a flat tax really is and how strong the benefits
and
are.
Steve, isn't that that flat tax an example of something that a Republican candidate should take a risk to get elected on, because then he'd have a mandate?
Yeah, look, I think I would sell this partly on growth. I mean, obviously, it's rocket fuel for the economy if you could have the United States with the lowest tax rate.
It'd solve every problem, including where the Mississippi River flows. Absolutely every problem.
But, John, my point is that there's also another appeal to this, which is when you look at polls, what Americans want from the tax system is fairness. And what we have to basically say as pro-growth Republicans is, look, it is fair. The current system is so corruptive. It is so complicated. It is so much.
It alienates the voters. It keeps them away from the polls because they think they're being robbed.
That's right. And this, you have to basically say, look, nobody's gonna have special interest loopholes anymore. It's not gonna matter who has the highest price lobbyists. Everybody's gonna pay, quote, their fair share. And I think that's a sellable point to the American people.
I think it's a key point. I think that what a flat tax does ultimately is it blows up K Street.
Yes, it does.
It ends cronyism. It ends corporate welfare. And I think people really resent. They know that special interests are dominating these discussions. But you could take all that away by simplifying and flattening the system. They did a pretty good job in '86. We ought to really go back to that.
Yep.
But, Steve, I think these, their intentions may be good, but I think they have to start explaining things. They've got to start walking people through it.
That's right.
We're going to turn to Mrs. Clinton next. She's in New Hampshire now. She was in Iowa last week, and Mrs. Clinton made a remark today that, well, it challenged the White House to explain it. Mrs. Clinton noticed the facts that over these last years, especially the Great Recession, small businesses have suffered. In fact, there are not growth of small businesses at all, especially for the young people, for the millennials, where we need the next generation of winners. They haven't been growing. Mrs. Clinton said a fact. That's a revelation to the White House. We'll talk about that when we come back. I'm John Batchelor with Larry Kudlow of CNBC and Steve Moore of the Heritage Foundation. This is The John Batchelor Show.